Fight for Justice is brought to you by the Kia Store of Anniston and Rainbow City.
Welcome to another edition of Fight for Justice. We appreciate you watching our show. We get a lot of feedback, even on the streets. People stop you and talk about the show. We try to have interesting subjects that you will like about the law. Tonight we have a special guest, Kirby Ferris from Birmingham. He practiced with a law firm of Ferris,
Riley, and Pitts.
Ferris, Riley, and Pitts, that's right. I've been on his show at Channel 6 in Birmingham, and he gave us the idea to do this, so we're trying to introduce a lot of different subjects to you. Freeman, why don't you talk a little bit to Kirby about what he does?
Yeah, well, first I just wanted to get some biographical information for the audience, where you're from, how long you've been practicing, things like that. So if you could just start by telling us where you're from and how long you've been practicing law.
Happy to. Let me start by saying how much I enjoy your show. Fantastic production and service that y'all are doing for the community, and thank y'all for having me on.
Thank you.
Grew up in Winston County, Alabama, and went to school at the University of North Alabama, finished law school, worked for a period of time with Norfolk Southern Railway, and then began practicing law. My law firm is Ferris, Riley, and Pitt. We do exclusively personal injury law. We handle automobile accidents, railroad accidents, plane crashes, train crashes. We also do some wage and hour work where people's overtime compensation is not being paid right. Have 9 lawyers in our firm, and really love the practice of law. Enjoyed it for over 20 years now.
Good. So you said you do a lot of personal injury stuff.
We do.
Give us a few examples of what kind of, is it car accidents or
Yes.
You mentioned train accidents?
We do. Having a background on the railroad, I do a lot of what is called FELA work, where workers on the railroad are injured. Also, we do sort of a regional practice. I was down in Pensacola, Florida. We were talking earlier this afternoon. We're down in Pensacola, Florida, doing a motor vehicle accident where a couple down there vacationing, and they were stopped at a red light on a motorcycle, and a drunk driver ran over the back of them on a motorcycle. Very serious injuries, so we were down there taking depositions in that case this week. We do some products liability, medical malpractice.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think we should probably start by just talking about, and we've talked about this before in other shows that we've done on personal injury and just injuries in general, when it's appropriate to hire a lawyer.
Yeah.
And every lawyer seems to have a different idea of when that is. I think we share a similar philosophy. Just tell the audience a little bit about that.
Sure, I'm glad to. Depending upon what kind of claim you've got, but if you're talking about a personal injury claim, I think that if you've been in an accident, motor vehicle accident, slip and fall accident, and you've had to go to the doctor for something more than just to make sure you're okay, if you've had to go to the doctor and you've got reoccurring treatment and you've got an actual injury, then you probably need to see a lawyer, because you're going to be dealing with an insurance adjuster who is a professional at what he does. He does claims evaluations day in, day out for a living. And the people we represent don't do that, and they're not familiar with the process.
Yeah, I think that's very, very important. It's something that we tell our clients all the time, that sometimes you won't know the extent of an injury for a little while. You know, if a neck or back injury, sometimes you can even go to one emergency room visit and everything can seem okay if you don't have an MRI done and you just have x-rays done, and 2 months later you could have already settled your claim and you still got some pain that you're dealing with, and then you don't have any way to get money for that.
And Freeman, we see it all the time. I've seen exactly the situation that you're describing a number of times. And you know, the nice thing about lawyers who do the kind of work we do, where you do personal injury work, and I know y'all's firm has been out here doing personal injury work for a long time, they can come in and see your dad, who has a wealth of experience, who knows what's going on in the claims process, and they don't have to pay him anything to do that. It's all on a contingency basis.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that we probably don't say enough, is that we don't, I don't think you guys do either, we don't charge for consultation.
No consultation charges. You can get great advice. They can come to y'all's office, sit down with you, and you can give them an idea of what they're dealing with. And then I'm sure y'all work on contingency fees as we do, which means that you don't have to pay for a lawyer as the case is going on. Just at
Let's talk about the contingency fee aspect. A lot of people don't understand that process. It's a percentage of the recovery, and you don't pay it until you get a recovery. And how does that benefit the client?
You know, Art, that's such a great question, and it's such a wonderful system because it allows our clients to go to war, so to speak, in the courtroom with major insurance companies, with major corporations, with companies that have hundreds of millions of dollars, or some of the best lawyers in the country. And the clients I represent couldn't hire a lawyer on an hourly basis to go into court for them. So the contingency fee allows them to hire quality lawyers like you guys to go in and work for them in the courtroom. It's a great system.
And I think, too, a lot of times our clients that we represent, and yours as well, or in case we've worked together before and had a great time doing it, is they have no concept of how much time it takes from the initial interviews in a case until you actually go to trial if that's necessary. Talk a little bit about that.
You know, that's, again, a great point. When you get involved in a personal injury case, and especially a serious personal injury case, from the time you file that case, it can be a year to a year and a half before you see any form of recovery. And a lawyer could have literally hundreds of hours in a case. And also something that, unless you do what we do, the expense of bringing a lawsuit today is extraordinary.
That's something I was going to ask you about next, is just
What
how
are the
expensive they can be.
Talk about the typical expenses. You and I know what they are, but the audience may not.
Well, the filing fees are upward of $500. You're going to have to do depositions, which are where we get to sit down with the other side, the people who have caused the accident, and ask them questions, and they're going to do the same with a court reporter there. That's a deposition. And the cost on those can be $500-600 each.
Or more?
Yes,
If you take a doctor's deposition, it can be thousands.
Tell us the typical doctor requirements to take his deposition, fee-wise.
If you take a doctor's deposition in Birmingham, and we have some wonderful doctors up there, but if you take a neurosurgeon's deposition or an orthopedic surgeon's deposition, you're going to pay about $1,500 for a half hour of his time.
And we got to front that money.
We have to front that
because the
money.
clients probably don't have the money to do that.
No.
So by the time the case is over, we can have a lot of money invested.
A great deal of money.
Yeah,
Yes.
and as well as time.
Yes.
So does it generally turn out to be the client's advantage?
I don't think there's any question about that.
Yeah.
That they can hire people to help them who are competent, know what they're doing, and bear the brunt of that expense.
Okay. We don't represent too many millionaires, do we?
No, we don't. We
And that's the
don't.
problem. So overall, would you say, and we only have 15 seconds in this segment left,
Sure.
but do you believe and recommend that when people need one, they should hire a lawyer?
I think that's the best thing for them to do
Okay.
for themselves and their families.
All right. Well, Kirby, thank you, and we'll be back after the break, which will be in a couple of minutes. Thank you for watching. Okay, welcome back to the second period of Fight for Justice, and we have as our guest Kirby Ferris from Birmingham, Ferris Riley in Pitts. I forgot that name earlier. I guess I got a little stage fright, even though we've been doing this for six or 8 months. We've been talking about various types of personal injury claims and when you might need a lawyer and when you might not. Let's continue with that discussion about when you might need a lawyer. What do you tell people who are trying to choose who they want to hire? Because you know, this day and time we got a lot of guys on billboards and other kinds of advertising, and this show is not per se an advertising, but it is an informational show we hope you'll learn from. But what do you tell people who are trying to decide who to hire?
You know, I think you ought to hire a lawyer just like you hire a doctor, or just like you hire someone to come into your home to work on your home. Don't hire the first person you see. And just because somebody's voice is loud on TV or billboards doesn't mean they're right for your case. You should be comfortable with your lawyer. I recommend that you interview 2 or 3 lawyers. Talk to them, meet them, find out what kind of people they are, and ask them a series of questions. What kind of cases have you handled? Have you handled cases like mine before? And very importantly, have you ever tried a case like mine? Because if I were hiring a lawyer today, I would want someone with courtroom experience, like you and Freeman, who have been in the battle before, and interview those lawyers and find out if you're comfortable with them. Don't just hire the first lawyer that you see on television.
Well, in fact, there are some who are promoting themselves who have tried little or no cases, and you don't know that when you see them advertised. So find out. And I think and personally, we get a lot of our cases by recommendations from other people.
Sure.
Not by going through an interview process. All that happened recently.
Sure.
They interviewed me and decided they wanted to use a younger lawyer, so they hired Freeman.
Oh, the young handsome guy, right?
Well, these were older people.
Wow.
But that was their choice, and
I
so
think they liked, in that particular situation, that they liked the idea of his experience.
Right.
Obviously, he's more experienced than I am, but they wanted a younger lawyer that they felt might be more driven.
That's a great
at this
story.
point.
Yeah.
That's a great
and
story.
it's true, and we're fine with that too. I know y'all are in your
Sure.
group.
Absolutely.
If you were not comfortable with this one, you want that one, then let's do that. Let's make it work for the client.
Mm-hmm.
So then you talk to them about after they do that process and they call you and select you, then what's your next step?
Well, we get them in. And of course, we've reviewed some of the basic facts of their case when we've been interviewed the first time. But when we get them in and are hired, it's time to go to work then. So we take more detailed information about the case. We have an in-house investigator that we send out to get witness statements. The one thing that I'd like to caution people about is this. When you're involved in an accident, within an hour of that accident, there's an insurance company working on it. That's just the way the system works. They're out there. They're not having to deal with lost wages, and they're not having to deal with a wrecked car, and they're not having to deal with hospital and doctor visits. Their job is to go investigate that accident. You need somebody doing that for you if you've been in an accident. So we immediately start that.
By the way, let me ask you about a legal principle you and I well know, and that's a spoliation of evidence.
Yes.
Is that a reason to get on a case early?
We see it all of the time.
Tell our audience what spoliation of evidence is and why it can be stopped if you get in the case early enough.
Sure. What happens is if there is a vital piece of information, let's use, for example, a tire on a vehicle that may have burst and caused an accident. If you don't hire a lawyer who sends what we call a preservation letter out that says everything involved in this accident preserve and don't allow it to get away from you, then by the time, let's say you wait a few months, you want to get to feeling better. By the time you hire a lawyer, that tire may not be anywhere to be found, and your case may be over at that point as a result of that. So hiring a lawyer early, and Arthur, I tell my clients this, when you hire a lawyer, then you can focus on getting well, and you can focus on taking care of your family, and allow the lawyer, if it's a good, competent lawyer, allow the lawyer to take over handling all of the rest of the things involved in your claim.
And then hopefully they'll leave it up to you to pursue it, and they won't call you every day and say, have you heard anything? We get that all the time. These things, unfortunately, take a lot of time.
They do take a lot of
And
time.
what would you say would be from the start to the finish in the average PI case that y'all handle over there? How long does it take to resolve? I know there's an average and there's a short and there's a long time.
There is. We actually track that. For cases with less serious injuries, we can usually get those cases moved in around 8 or 9 months. But in cases with more serious injuries where you have to file a lawsuit and litigate the case, you're probably looking at somewhere between a year and 18 months.
And it would also depend where you are, too.
Very much so.
Yeah. I don't know. How's the docket in Jefferson County? They run pretty current within, you say within a year? Or
Yeah,
not?
great system. We got great judges in Jefferson County. They keep their cases moving, and you can get your case heard anywhere between a year and 18 months in Jefferson County, which statewide, that's pretty good,
fast.
especially with the volume that they have down
And now, as I read recently, where the number of cases being tried is way down.
there. It is.
Down by a third or more.
It is.
Why do you think that is?
I think there's several things at work there. We've gone through a time period, especially here in Alabama, where the concept of bringing a personal injury claim has really been downtrodden some. It's been frowned upon. And I think there are a lot of political agendas involved in that, because the truth is, we have constitutional rights to jury trials, and the laws that we try to enforce are laws that involve safety. And that's what we're trying to promote.
Well, let me add to that this one other factor that a lot of people, you've all heard about the McDonald's coffee case.
Sure.
And other cases that they thought are frivolous. How do you decide whether a case is frivolous or worth bringing or not?
Well, we try to be very conscientious about that. And one of the things that's very interesting to me is that we can't exist and survive as a business filing frivolous lawsuits.
Yeah.
We have to evaluate a case and determine whether it is a good case with real injuries and real liability or we can't stay in business because we can't make a living.
Based on the time and money you have to invest in a case.
Absolutely.
Have you, in your 20 years career, have you ever had a client pay you by the hour to handle a personal injury case?
I've actually never had that.
Me
Not a
neither.
single time.
When you tell them how much, what it's going to cost out of pocket as you go along, they said, no thank
Well,
you.
my hourly rate's not as high as yours, but
Oh,
still.
correct.
Well, I think also a lot of people don't realize that in this state we have, I think it's called the Alabama Litigation Accountability
Absolutely.
Act, which if you do file a frivolous lawsuit can get you into some trouble and have you pay for things that you wouldn't have to if it, obviously if it wasn't, you'd have money coming in instead of going
Why don't
out.
you tell our audience what that act means?
Let's talk a bit about that. I don't mean to get bogged down too much in the law.
Yeah.
But when you file a lawsuit, the first thing that you see, if it's not a good case, is what we call a 12B motion. There is a simple motion that can be filed by a defense attorney that says there's no basis for this claim. And if the lawyer is correct and the judge agrees, that case is over like that. It's not going to stay on the books 30 days. Then the second thing is a motion for summary judgment, where after some limited discovery has been conducted, a motion can be filed to determine whether the case has validity. And then anytime a lawyer files a case in bad faith, where he is filing a case not for just reasons, he can be sanctioned for that. The court can actually impose a fine upon a lawyer through what we call the law.
You know, and I haven't seen very many frivolous lawsuits. I've seen some, but not very many. And that act may have dampened people's enthusiasm for filing a lawsuit just over anything. People ask me all the time, can I be sued over that? Ma'am, you can be sued over anything. The question is, are you going to win? Are they going to win?
I think the other thing is if you look at that McDonald's case in particular, there's a great documentary on that. I don't know if you've ever seen it, called Hot Coffee.
Yes.
And the injuries she had were just gruesome. And the coffee was kept, extremely hotter than it should have been. And most people don't know the facts of that case.
That's right.
But
And I would encourage people to go on the internet and take a look at that movie.
Okay, we've got a break at this point. So as a moderator, thank you for watching. We'll be back in the third segment in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to Fight for Justice. This is our third and final segment of our show today. As I stated earlier, we have a special guest from Birmingham, Kirby Ferris, whose practice is all personal injury cases. Ours is primarily personal injury cases, but occasionally we'll do other things as well. So we were talking about contingency fees and about hiring a lawyer early on, how important that is. Let's mention again, if you don't mind, Kirby, about contingency fees and why they are really helpful for the client.
Well, it enables a client to go out and hire a lawyer, hire a competent lawyer, an experienced lawyer to go to war in the courtroom against insurance companies, corporations, where they don't have to pay an upfront fee or an hourly rate. The lawyer on the back end of the case, only if he's successful, takes a percentage of the recovery. It's a great system.
Otherwise, they're not out any money,
That's right.
which is nice to be able to tell people.
Yes.
Well, let's change our focus a little bit to adjusters who you have to deal with initially before you even file a lawsuit. After the lawsuit's filed, the adjuster gets in the background and you're dealing with a lawyer for the entity or the person that may be involved in the litigation. But initially you're fooling with adjusters, and sometimes that can be awfully frustrating, can't it, Kirby?
It can. It can be
Talk
very
about that a little bit, about dealing with adjusters.
And Arthur, not only is it frustrating, it can be dangerous to your client, because adjusters are professionals. Adjusting claims is what they do for a living. My clients have often never been through the experience before, and there are laws in this state that are pitfalls, such as contributory negligence, which says if you are in any way at fault in an accident that you're not able to recover in Alabama. Now, when you think about that in terms of a professional adjuster taking a statement from you, let's say in an automobile accident case, questions like, "Wow, you probably shouldn't have been going quite that fast on that wet road, should you, Mr. Jones?
were you on your phone?
Were you on your phone? Were you paying attention? I guess not. Were you?" Those kinds of questions, you can find that you've destroyed your claim. So when you're dealing with an adjuster, they're competent, they're good at what they do, and you have to be very careful.
Let me ask you this about, and it's been my experience when dealing with smaller amounts at stake, damages or injuries. I've had adjusters who are very fair, who are
Yes.
reasonable, easy to deal with, but you still ought to have legal counsel.
Yes.
Unless you're really not hurt, dealing with a personal property only.
Right.
But when you get to the major claim, the lost leg, my first case was a lost leg.
Wow.
40 years ago. When that happens, you're absolutely foolish not to have the assistance of able legal counsel. Do you agree with that, Kurt? I know you do.
I wholly agree with that. Yes.
Why is that?
Well, what is at stake is so much more important in those circumstances, because when you've lost a leg, your earning capacity for your family is probably impaired. You have an injury that you're going to have to live with a lifetime. And the way you should be compensated and the things you should be compensated for are very different in a serious personal injury case. And some things maybe that people wouldn't expect they are entitled to be compensated for. Future lost wages, not just what you've lost today, but what you're going to lose in the future.
And most people don't know that, do they?
Not many people don't.
You got to educate them. And then when you're dealing with the insurance adjuster, or in a lot of cases the insurance defense counsel, then you've got somebody knowledgeable to help you get all of the elements that you're entitled to by law to recover and deal with it.
I think something else is important to note is that you could also end up waiving your right to go against your own insurance company if you don't have proper counsel and you don't know how to give notice and all of those things. You could end up waiving your right to go against that to get the rest of the money that you could be owed.
Because there's multiple coverages available to you in most personal injury actions. And the way they interact is exactly right. You can lose coverages.
Yeah, I think that's important. And another factor that I think is important and why you almost absolutely got to have counsel, if you've got a permanent injury, it's sometimes a battle to prove it's permanent or not.
That's right.
Am I right?
That's right.
It can be a partial permanent injury, which gets into valuation questions, and you're probably not competent to do that. But what can a lawyer do to help that out?
Well, I can give you a great example of that.
Okay.
Folks my age, I'm 51, I think.
51. You're a young man, Kirby.
But
young man.
At 51, I've already got some things going on in my back called what the doctors call degenerative disc disease.
Right.
And if you get a back injury in an automobile accident and you're over the age of 35 or 38, they're going to get an MRI, and the insurance company's going to look at that MRI and go, well, look, you've got this degeneration in your back. Maybe this accident didn't cause it, when you know fully that it did.
Well, there's also aggravation of a pre-existing condition.
Exacerbation.
And how do you know, without a lawyer, how do you know how to prove that?
That's
the problem.
And it can be very tricky and very difficult to prove.
Yeah. Is that true with any other elements of damages and when your calculation of, let's say, nursing home costs the rest of your life?
Absolutely. It is. Future lost wages, generally you need an economist to help you prove that. Your functional capacity, like how is this injury, how is it going to affect my ability to play with my kids or go water skiing or go fishing or hunting or the things that I like to do. And you will need a professional, functional capacity evaluation done by a professional to measure where you were before this wreck and where you are now and where you're likely to be in the future.
And how many people that come to see us know how to do that?
I didn't before I started in this business.
It's just something ordinary folks out there are not acquainted with.
No.
So, go ahead.
Well, I think we talked about, and I like to drive this home every time we talk about personal injury, is coverage, which when you sign up for insurance, car insurance, you have an opportunity to, you have to be given the opportunity to get that coverage, which is underinsured or uninsured motorist coverage. If you happen to get into an accident with somebody who doesn't have insurance, then your own insurance company can pay you. Or if you get in an accident with someone who has minimum coverage or just not enough coverage in general, then you can also get money from your own insurance coverage.
Yeah, how many people come to see you have turned down underinsured coverage?
We see it occasionally, and it's so frustrating.
Blows your mind,
and
doesn't it?
sad,
Yeah.
because it is your opportunity to protect yourself against other people, and it's very inexpensive. It is some of the most inexpensive insurance that you can get.
Now, just to clarify, as we all three of us know, insurance companies are required to offer you underinsured. You have to specifically reject it. So when I had a case not long ago, 2 or 3 years ago, where they rejected it, and that's the only possibility they had for recovery, we can do anything for them.
Right.
They're gone.
Sad situation when you see that.
What about personal umbrella policies?
I'm a big believer. Have one myself. And
Well, all lawyers got them.
and they're so inexpensive.
Yeah.
For a couple $100s a year, you can put over your other policies, or why they call it an umbrella.
Yeah.
A policy that can protect you up to $500,000 or $1 million very inexpensively. So if you do make that mistake and you injure somebody, then the coverage is out there to take care of them, which we all want if we make a mistake, and your personal assets are protected.
In fact, once you've got a litigation going on, you can make the insured tell you what coverage they've got, including personal umbrella, so you know kind of what the pot is out there, and you use that as part of your negotiation process, is it not?
It is. It is.
I think something else that's important, that if you try to do this on your own, you don't know anything about subrogation,
Yes.
about the insurance companies or Medicare or Medicaid's right to have some of the money you receive from the insurance carrier, from the person that's injured you. They have a right to some of that money.
They do, the health insurance companies you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because the health insurance companies step in on the front end to pay your medical expenses and are entitled to get some of their money back.
Yeah, and they will negotiate with you.
They will.
Yeah. We have about 15 seconds left in this third and final segment. So Kirby, we appreciate you coming over here from
Thank you.
Birmingham this afternoon.
Enjoyed it.
I think it's been a good show, so I apologize for Mr. Riley's name I couldn't remember. Stage fright, but thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Is there any final shots you want to, information you want to give the audience? We got about 5 seconds.
If you get hurt, get a lawyer and get with your agent and talk about underinsured motorist coverage.
All right. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.